This is the Data Citizens Dialogues, your guide to bringing trust to your data, decisions, and all things AI.
Hi, this is Stan from Colibra, and we're here with Gaurav from ThoughtWorks. Gaurav, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stan. Thanks for the invitation. We have been planning to do this since quite a long, but I'm really glad that I am here with you.
Definitely, Gaurav, and the world around us changes. There's AI up the wazoo, and we need to talk about it all the time. So we will. But before we get to that gorilla in the room topic, let's get to know each other a little bit, and then we'll
Yeah,
start exploring how we look at the market, right? What we see happening in the world of data and AI, and what kind of perspective we can leave the audience with from our vantage point. So, but why don't you start a little bit with yourself, Gaurav? Like, who are you? Who do you work for, and
yeah.
what's your company's strategy or perspective maybe on this current landscape? And of course, feel free to talk as long as you want, Gaurav, and we'll pick on any topics we want to dive in deeper
Definitely.
on.
Definitely. Thanks, Stan. Yeah, so I'm Gaurav. My current role is of a principal data strategist at ThoughtWorks. I am based out of their Amsterdam office. So I lead mostly projects around data governance, data quality for clients in Netherlands and for the rest of the Europe. I have been in this space for roughly now 12 years, into the consulting space primarily. I started, working more on the technical aspects, but later I gradually moved into the business advisory and consulting side around governance, why businesses should do it, how they perceive it, and the challenges and how do we solve it around that. Uh, been a part of multiple organizations, IT led, even business led, and I have traveled all over the Europe and now finally kind of trying to settle down in the Netherlands. Apart from that, yeah, I am also an author. I have a book called Data Quality ROI,
Mhm.
which was launched like 6 months ago, so it's still in the market. So that was based on the all the learnings and understanding that I learned from the data community and the clients, and that was my honest attempt to share back some of the learnings through it. So yeah, and apart from that, my current organization, ThoughtWorks, is kind of a pioneer in all of this data mesh and agile-based approaches. So within this company, we talk a lot about how do we, work with data products, how do we make it even more secure, discoverable, trusted, governed. My focus is more on the governance side of things, but there is a lot of things that ThoughtWorks is into. And now with AI coming into place, it's a lot of automation driven. Like, how do we accelerate the data product creation? How can we automate it end to end? How does AI work? That's one line, and there is a larger part around the overall software application and delivery as well. That's what typically, IT or a service firm do. So yeah, that's a quick intro.
Thanks a lot, Gaurav. And Amsterdam is a good choice to settle down. So
Yes.
glad you're enjoying yourself there. I also noted the experience in both business and IT kind of perspective. I heard you mention a data mesh. I heard you mention your data quality ROI book.
ROI,
So if I
yes,
go on
yes,
Amazon or
yes.
bol.com, I can
This
type
is yeah,
data quality ROI. I'll find you.
yes,
And we, of course, we can drop a link for the audience as well. But before we get to all of those topics, of which there are many to unpack, maybe let's start a little bit how you got into data or AI in the first place. You're in
yeah,
school, now you have to start your career. How did you end up in this crazy data land?
yeah. And it was honestly not on purpose. Uh, Back after, so I am an MBA as well. So after my MBA, I joined Infosys back in India, and initially my role was more on the data analyst, data visualization side. Helping uh, change those business insights into some sort of visualization metrics and all of those things. But at that time, all of these things like GDPR and data privacy and governance and all of those have started to making noise in the overall industry landscape. And some of my mentors who were starting new in this area from an Infosys, organization, they were looking for folks, who can talk to the business, can, also understand the IT side a little bit, and basically play the role of a bridge between business and IT. So basically, MBA graduates with a bit of technical, knowledge, those kind of, and that's where, they offered me to kind of jump teams and basically start building out this offering. So we were sitting in a room and we started from scratch. What offerings should we give to our clients? What is data governance all about? What is data quality all about? And that's where I think it started. And gradually, uh, all of my interest, all of my work then started aligning around those areas for different clients. For some, it was data privacy. For some, it was quality. For some, it was catalog. As part of my, like I said, in my initial experiences, I worked hands-on with Colibra was very new at that time in the market, so I got hands-on experience using, to deploying Colibra for our clients. Similarly with other tools and technologies. So that's how I got in this industry, and then later I started to realize that it's a much, it's not technical; it's a much wider perspective. There is a lot of things that needs to be considered for this stream to be successful, and that's where I think I have evolved over the years, I can say.
That's not the first time, Gaurav, that I'm hearing somebody, tell the story. I got into data by accident. And I think that's interesting because it sort of provides a fresh, unbiased perspective. You have a
Perspective.
naive look at the space and you're coming in, and that allows you to maybe see or learn things that others don't immediately pick up. Like, for example, how data very much is a business imperative, right? The business needs to take some kind of ownership there, grow their
Yes.
understanding, which is maybe also why you said, okay, there's a lot of learning needed. I have to write this book, right? So, what was it that gave you the trigger to say, okay, now it's time to write this book about the ROI of data quality? What made you do that?
There was quite a few triggers to do that, honestly. One was like I was working on, different clients, different data culture, different geographies, and when it came to data quality, the I heard some of the most common repeating frustrations around data quality. Say for data quality is not a business responsibility; it should be owned by IT. Let's buy a data quality tool and, do data quality and we are done. Or, basically, let's do it as a one-time cleansing activity for our CRM, ERP, and so those kind of, kind of frustrations were coming again and again. And I wanted to share back the experience of how this different kind of teams perceive, even though the frustrations were common, their experiences were different. So what was that? And another trigger was I started writing blogs and on LinkedIn way back in 2018, 2019. I used to write a lot. I still write a lot about these topics. And then people also start sharing their experiences on social media, like, okay, we have done this has worked for us, no, this is the wrong approach. People started reaching out, the network grew there. This better, that this entire lovely data community that we have all over the world, they come up with so much insights and value to this, in their work. So a lot of those learnings and insights I started to capture that. And then later, I think I realized that, I had enough different pieces on the board, and I wanted to put them back in the form of a book. But then the main challenge was like, okay, how do I connect these different dots together? I didn't wanted to write a technical book, because there is already quite a bit literature available in that. I don't want to just add one more technical book. I wanted to make it relevant. And that's why, like, my book was, the foundation came on the Newton's laws. So Newton had these three laws for the physical world. I created three laws for the data quality world, similarly to what Newton has created, and that created a foundation. And that's where I shared back all of those learnings and my experiences and some of the strategies that I have seen proven to be successful in my area of work. So that's how that book came into picture. And yeah, I was fortunate that the Technics Foundation, who is also the publisher for Dama book, they liked the idea and they kind of, came on board, and that's how this entire thing happened.
So if I summarize that, then you were hitting too many times in too many accounts. The trigger,
Yes.
data
Yes.
quality is important, but somebody else has to do it,
Somebody else.
right?
Yeah.
And then he said, okay, let me just write the book. And we don't want to give away the whole book, right, Gaurav, because people can buy it and read it. But I do, if you're open for it, I do want to explore those Newton's laws.
Yeah.
If you can summarize those three, how you apply Newton's laws into data quality laws. I'm really curious about that now.
So, for example, there are 4 or 5 different laws that I have explored. But if we talk about the three key ones, and I'll take an example of which one, which is most commonly known, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That's Newton's law. In data quality terms, it means like the more you push technical jargon on the business, there will be an equal and opposite frustration from the business towards you. In short, basically, it means that if you try to talk data quality in a technical language to the business, the natural reaction from them that will be more of frustration and resistance towards you. So then that is the law, that is the concept. And how do we solve this? What does it mean? What does it, what are the common patterns that I have seen, and what is the potential solution for it? So that's how I have explored each one of them. And there is one more, law around, like, okay, force is equal to mass to acceleration, like same thing. So basically, the bigger the data quality problem in your organization, the more effort will be required to achieve some meaningful acceleration. What it means, like, it's not a job of one small data quality team or one small domain team to kind of, achieve end-to-end data quality. You will need support and help from your counterparts. It may be that your platform teams, your governance teams, your education and literacy teams, all of them, when comes together in a form of support, that's when your data quality programs start accelerating for your underlying business use cases or vision, whatever it is. So that's how, I have framed it, and then gave some relevant examples that I've seen and so on.
You're making me more and more curious about the book, Gaurav, but I like those examples.
Yeah,
You have a big data quality problem, big mass. It's hard to get that into momentum, or the opposite. If you get that going, it's hard to slow it down again. So,
yeah,
and on the other hand, and that's something that I've seen a lot, Gaurav. So, good two laws so far, and the book has more. But indeed, as data people, and I've experienced this myself. I've done this myself, we often start speaking in our data jargon, right? Whether it's a data
exactly,
lake or a data mesh or a data this or the other. Um, I believe that what you're describing is true, right? If you push too much jargon, the business will push back with frustration. And in the end, I don't think it's the business's job to learn the data jargon,
exactly.
but rather the data people's job to learn the business's jargon, which is typically always about, well, what does it cost and what will it make me and what are the risks and how can I
Exactly.
avoid them? So good
There is a
points.
reason to also that, because if you carefully and like analyze who are this business that we are talking into, these people are not necessarily coming from technical background. A finance expert is maybe a graduate in finance stream. A compliance officer is coming from a different education background. They do not have an understanding of what this technical means. For them, data is equal to database is equal to IT. That's it, simple. That what they have learned in life. So that's why it's what you said was correctly, that the other side has to make efforts in order to understand what the business is, really mean, and then try to communicate it.
Definitely. Thanks for raising the awareness in the market, Gaurav. Now, let's move back a little bit from the book, which everybody should buy and read, but let's move to ThoughtWorks, your
Yes,
organization. The way I understand it, and this goes back a little bit in time, but ThoughtWorks has always been a well-respected firm in the engineering environment. And if I'm not mistaken, they're also the original conceivers of the data mesh concept,
mesh.
right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So, it's been maybe is it now 10 years that the data mesh is
Yeah, yeah.
out there in the market as a concept? But maybe, just your 2 cents, it being in the market for the last 10 years, what is the good, bad, and ugly? What are the learnings that we can take away from the 10-year experience with data mesh in the market?
Yeah. So my experience, I'll share from the last 2 years with ThoughtWorks. Earlier, when I used to hear or talk about data mesh, I had a very fragmented view, to be honest, on data mesh. Like I've seen it working in bits and pieces in some organizations, somewhere, failed attempts and so on. But with ThoughtWorks, I saw that, the mindset towards data mesh is more important than the approach, and that mindset is as the data as the product mindset, that what thoughtworks believe in. You have to it's not only doing something technically through code on your platform, on your data platform, and you build data products and it will work overnight. It's a mindset about the entire process. It's about how do you define your business use cases, how do you backtrack it, how do you kind of shape your data products, how do you understand who will consume it, how do you understand the different restrictions, basically governance side of things. What quality criteria should it have? What are the SLOs, data contracts, and all those terms now came in. But what is basically that constitutes a good data product? I think that requires a lot of workshop mode kind of an activities where people sit. So as part of a lot of engagement which I have been part into, there are like weeks of workshops where people sit down, draw those domain diagrams, event storming kind of a sessions, and they nail it down to the lowest granular level around, okay, what does this data product is actually going to serve, to whom, and what does it impact it will have. And then all the layers start top of it. Okay, then how do we model semantics, how do we bring in the context, how do we define it in our catalog, what rules should be it, who is going to do what. So I think that's my experience. And in currently I've seen a lot of organizations are moving towards data products. They have started realizing the benefits, basically, of domain based approach. Like, each domain will have a control of the data products. But from a governance perspective, if you ask me, I think that federated governance sometimes get misunderstood as fragmented governance. So that's why you will see, in one organization there will be 3 4 different data catalogs that exist, or different data quality solutions that exist. Each team is trying to do a data strategy of its own, and coming up with their own data products. With that, then that enterprise wide stitching or enterprise wide view of your data estate becomes really challenging. And with AI, then it doesn't serve the purpose, because with AI, if your underlying estate is not connected, it will give you those vertical outputs only without having context from all the other aspects. So that part is still evolving. That part is now organization started that, what's the role the data governance team plays? What is self-service mode? How can they help? Where the tools and technologies should lie? How can they accelerate? And that's where I think a lot of data catalogs or data management tools using including Colibra have started providing those data marketplace kind of experience, where they can find, users can find all the information or all the nuances around a data product at one place. So I think that's a good start to to solving this problem.
Definitely, and we're going to touch on the marketplaces in a second,
Yeah.
Gaurav. But thanks for your short perspective on the data mesh. And I fully agree with you. I mean, the self-service aspect remains important, and maybe
Yes.
with AI becomes even bigger. Governance, right? Recognizable that there has been fragmentation happening in the market because, everybody and their dog, technology-wise, started offering catalogs and, pretending that this now became governance, but you cannot run governance within an individual technology silo. It is a organizational imperative, of course. But let's start first with with data as a product, with those data products, because that's indeed, to your point, a very popular emerging topic in
Mhm.
the market and in many customers. Um, and indeed, if I understood correctly, it does originate out of that data mesh history, if I would say. And what I like about it, Gaurav, is very simple. For me,
Yeah.
if you talk to a business person and you take away the data jargon, then you see Business
Mm.
people are very familiar with, okay, we need a new product or service that we need to deliver to the market, to our customers,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And this is not something that happens on a whim, right? This is something that, there's business planning that goes in front of it. There's processes like the ideation and the sunsetting and everything in between. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, what do those processes, what does that mindset mean then for a data product in that context? But for a
Yeah.
business person, it's the data product is the shortest distance, I would say,
Shortest.
between
Yeah.
data and the dollar. And in the end, that's what the business cares about, right? So,
Exactly.
but let's start maybe with the pitfall question almost, because when you talk to data people, semantics discussions can go a long way. So let's keep it short, Gaurav. What do you see as what is a data product for you?
Yeah, I think you defined it very correctly that it's the smallest distance for a business person between, data and dollar. And, I see it the similar way. And, if we want to see practically, like, for example, last month I was traveling through this, leading airline carrier. When I was traveling from Amsterdam, they asked me to fill in a lot of details about, my passport number and all of those details, and I filled it and I traveled. And when I came back, return from the other geography, they asked me to fill the exactly same details again to go through. Even though I had the same booking, I booked both the flights on the same booking ID. And that's where I realized how kind of disconnected the systems are, because there are different sources, different method, and this is how it's resulting in bad customer experience. So for if I am a part of that airline, maybe in the flights department or in the customer experience department, the immediate data product for me is to be solve this problem for better customer experience, wherein I have a information that whatever my traveler fills in at point A of his geography, for that entire booking period, that information stays, updated for his portfolio or for his travel, so that when he comes from the return journey, or if he has multiple journeys in the loop, he doesn't have to go through that experience again. So that is where, that immediately pops up the overall customer experience, and then the dollar value for that airlines, because next time I will be careful about whether to go with this airline or other airline which has a slightly better customer experience. So in short, it's the smallest component that can drive business value. That's how I view data products purely from a business perspective.
I like that definition.
Yeah.
The smallest unit that generates business value is very clear.
Reusable and smallest reusable. Yeah.
Reusable. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Let me take an example from my side, Gaurav, and I'll make a distinction, right? So for me, for example, if I look at a self-service dashboard, be it like a Looker or Power BI, Tableau,
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
have you, dashboard, right? Um, this could be a data product, according
Yes.
to our definition.
Yes.
But
Yes.
what I often see in organizations, it is not treated as such. Um, you know, what happens is people hire like a dashboard builder, right? So somebody with, let's say,
Mm.
Tableau skills. And then, of course, that person, what they do is they build dashboards. But if nobody ever looks at the dashboard,
Exactly.
then it is impossible that you derive value from it, because if you don't look at it, you cannot make decisions with it and you cannot take actions on it, so you cannot make business change with it, right? It's
Yeah.
literally unused, but the cost, of the storage, the compute, and the risk of that data copying being, another expansion of the surface area of attack becomes bigger. So more risk, more cost, but no value. Clearly, the dashboard exists and is a real thing, but in my mind, that is not a data product because there's no responsibility taken
Yeah.
for impact.
Exactly.
Is that something you agree or disagree with? Either way is fine, Gaurav.
No, it completely makes sense. Even though it's a dashboard or a report, unless it is reusable for making business definitions, I cannot categorize it as a product. It's just a kind of a report that someone usually looks, in a month or two. But yes, definitely that there is an opinion in the industry that whether dashboards or reports can serve as data products or not. There is a lot of debate but I think it personally can if it solves the specific business problem. Again, when it comes to the airline example, the flight status, I think whatever we see, on airports is also a kind of a report only. It's a dashboard that keeps updating every millisecond or so. It's just the form that they have shown is different, but it's coming that information is gathered through some sort of internal dashboard or that way. So it's valuable because it's serving your customers, it's serving your business, and it's reusable. Multiple operations, multiple aspects of your business can use it simultaneously. So that's my view.
Well, I think we are in agreement, maybe even violent agreement. But let's maybe explore the data products a little bit longer. So when I look at a data product, and I think you mentioned something similar earlier, it's about mindset, it's about process, right, in the organization. And there's a variety of ways of doing that and organizing that, of course, as many as there are companies. But let's just touch on one quote unquote governance aspect,
Yes.
the role, right? So let's look at a role or a responsibility around the data product, and I'll pick one, Gaurav, but we can elaborate, of course. And I'll pick the hot potato one, right, which is the data product owner, right?
Hmm.
What does that mean? Who is responsible for it? But if you mix in the word ownership, very quickly it becomes a hot potato. No, I don't want to be the owner. I don't know what it means. I already have enough work to do, right? But in the end, somebody does need to take ownership.
Ownership. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I've seen techniques or little tricks applied. Well, let's not call it the data product owner. Let's call it the data product manager. And then maybe it's, an easier conversation. But in the end result needs to be the same, right? Some
Exactly.
responsibility, minimal responsibility needs to be identified and taken up so the data product can make its impact. So, from your perspective, what's the absolute minimum responsibility that should be put in place?
I agree. I think there is even a -1 level view that needs to be considered for this responsibility. Like you rightly said that I have seen people that that one morning they woke up and they get an email saying that you are the owner from today for this domain apparently and all the data products within it, and he's like, oh, but why? Like, okay, what do I need to do? I don't know. Those kind of instances are also common. um, and there are a lot of things like instead of data product owner, they create a category about domain owner, domain stewards, business stewards, and pass it out that responsibility to it. Because what traditionally has been the approach is this data product owners are primarily conceived as technical folks, someone who kind of ideate or design solutions for creation of data products on data platforms. So they come up and say that I know how does to implement it, but what does it mean? The elements that are part of this data product, I don't know what it means because I sit on the IT side. I don't know. It has to come from the business side. So that's why that -11 view is very important. That ownership aspect is still challenged. Like, instead of appointing, whether a product owner or steward or whoever is should be doing it, it's important to also focus on the process of doing it. What do we really mean by ownership? What does that particular individual has to do? Is it and for example, semantics, define creating standard definitions, but definitions on what? What standards they should be using based on the industry? There are different standards there are open data standards, there are industry specific data standards. What do they really need to do? And I think that's a space where the governance is not completely explored, or the current set of generation is trying to explore that space. Because once that challenge is solved, even though 50%, I think the rest of the things will streamline a bit. And I will come to the technology part in relation to this later, but I see a strong correlation between these two, like how technology can help, accelerate this entire part.
Yeah, I think when you touch the word governance, people always say it's a people and process problem, which is true. But of course, people and process problems at scale do require
Technology.
technology. But let's
Yes.
explore further, maybe on two areas with the data product. So one area, let's say, around responsibility in the example of access, right? So
Hmm.
you have a data product, how do you determine who gets access, right? Who gets this? That's one responsibility we can talk about a little bit. But on the other hand, and another plug for your book, Goraf, on the other hand is the quality aspect, right? So what does it mean when a data product fails its quality as agreed, for example, in a data contract, right? What needs to happen and who is responsible for making that happen? These are two examples, access and quality of areas that come with responsibility for a data product. So again, somebody should be looking into this, right?
Yes.
How do you
Yes.
look at those both
I,
of those examples?
and both of this access and quality, when it comes to permissions and all, there are two levels to that. It's one is okay, who will determine whether who can have the right access or what is the right quality criteria and so on. And the other is who's going to provision this from backend systems. And that's where a lot of confusion happens. The business side imagines that okay, it's IT's responsibility, and they say that okay, you manage everything. But IT says that yes, we will provision it. But whom should I, whether person X has requested access, whether he should really get it or not, that criteria we cannot determine on our own. And then lots of discussions and backlogs and months go by, and then there is nothing concrete, and that takes the overall data product usability ratio very down. So that's where I think a clear separation between this owner's side and the implementer side needs to happen. Yes, whoever the maybe data steward, you can call it data steward for the domain, or the very specific data product owner, manager, whoever it is, that individual has to determine based on the use case why the data product was created, who are the list of people or consumers that this data product can be made accessible to. It's usually through output ports that they open it and people can consume it as API in multiple ways. But which teams can really have access to it? Is there any sort of PII data in it? What kind of masking needs to go into it? Same for quality as well. Quality is a very broader term, I think, because quality can mean different things to the different consumers down the line. Maybe I have different quality expectations from you, and it's not always the case that all of those expectations are kind of uh, juggled up in the data product thing. Some more things will always miss out. So it's important to follow some standard meta model criteria, what I usually call it as, okay, every data product should be having this 10 set of characteristics. Basically, it should have a definition, it should have an owner, it should have some context around it, it should have very standard set of checks around, if there is a primary key, there should not be any duplicates. All of those standard criteria baked in from the start, and then based on your consumer feedback, you bring in those business specific checks or accuracy related checks, and then keep that life cycle iterative. So that's typically what I usually recommend, rather than just waiting for months to come everything, and then just that doesn't fit the purpose actually.
Of course not. And there's a few extra topics that you touched on there, like the word context and the different criteria on quality. And then I agree with your point, Goraf, on access in the context of a data product. You're completely correct, right? If I'm a data engineer, of course, I can set permissions on some database tables or
Yeah.
some other kind of system. The technicality of that is not hard, but how do I know, as that
Yes.
data engineer, that you, who is asking me that question, are authorized to actually access those tables, right? I don't have that information, then I cannot make that decision, and I need somebody to fall back on to help me make that decision informed. Otherwise, we're giving the wrong data or the wrong data products to the wrong people.
Yeah.
And this is also, when I took on the role of leading Colibra's data office, that's also the approach that I took. The first thing I did,
Mm.
set up the data marketplace, and have our little data lake ready there with data products waiting in there. And we've connected, in that sense, the data marketplace experience, which is like a shopping experience,
Shopping
with
experience.
the identity management and the access system, so that ultimately when you shop and it gets approved, automated through policy or manually through the data product manager's review, let's say, then we can automatically set those permissions, and the data engineers then are absolved of all of that
Yeah.
very regular burden. And on data marketplaces, Gaurav, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Data products are full of data marketplace, sorry, is full of data products, should be, of course, which could be data sets, it could be reports, it could be some
Yes.
AI
Yeah.
widgets up the wazoo. And in my viewpoint, it's also an excellent instrument to help bring together that fragmented landscape that we talked about earlier, right? Because, of course, if I'm a large organization, I'm going to have some data in my SAP, in my Microsoft, in my Google, in my Databricks, in my Amazon, in my Snowflake, in my Teradata, in my IBM, in my Microsoft SQL Server, and so on and so forth. And of course, if I try to do governance in all of those little ivory towers, I'm going to have a very fragmented landscape.
Yes.
But the good news is that indeed today, each of those components is offering what I refer to as like a metadata capability, like a catalog type capability, where a data marketplace like a Colibra can then plug in and say, well, doesn't matter where your data sits, but here is the marketplace viewpoint of that. So, what kind of experiences, Gaurav, have you seen when it comes to setting up or rolling out or conceiving of the data marketplace concept?
Yes. So for me, a marketplace is more of a kind of a ground for curating these different experiences that you spoke about. There are different stakeholders in this organization, and if I have these components from a business perspective, IT perspective, made with definitions, quality, my everything information around that data product in one place, stitched together, I think marketplace provide that kind of experiences. And it is also depending on the different stakeholders. So for business users, it's very easy, plug and play, natural language. With AI now, there is a lot of assistance as well to do those things. So I think it's gaining a lot of momentum wherever these data products or data sets. Earlier, it was more of the reporting as well, kind of which reports are critical and what commonly is used, KPI trackings, everything. But with data products coming in as well, this kind of experience is very much essential in my view. Uh, yes, it's still iterative, it's still building up. I would love to also have a little bit of additions to this entire experiences to solve the challenges around the ownership part, for example, that we discussed. How this data marketplace as a platform or a solution tool can help these people, tackling some of this domain modeling, semantics, conversations, ownership related conversations. Can it ease them into it? Obviously, it's a lot of people oriented, so not everything can be, kind of done into a tool, but can we ease them, is that process through this marketplace? I think that's how I see marketplaces eventually evolving. And with AI, I think the capabilities are becoming more and more mature.
Absolutely. And now we've touched on the AI topic enough, so let's go there and let's explore it a little bit. And we both can agree that it's a fast-moving terrain, right? So we can give a perspective, but who knows what tomorrow will brings even. But for example, when you touch on a marketplace and you mention AI, then two things come into mind immediately. One, the Copilot can be like your guided shopper, right? It helps you in that discovery experience. And on the other hand, you can ask yourself that at some point in time, maybe the data marketplace becomes actually a place where not just people are shopping, but agents, and then they follow the same rules and they have access to the same curated data products, which they
Yeah,
also need as context, so
exactly.
that those agents can make informed decisions and actions. But you said governance also earlier, Gaurav.
Hmm.
One of my favorite words. So let's explore that a little bit. If you look at data governance and you look at AI governance, in your viewpoint, where do they overlap? Where do they differ? What can one learn from the other?
So yeah, so AI governance as a term, I think, got much recognition when this volume of unstructured data started coming up, and the monitoring and the governance aspect. The example which you gave, the AI agents, kind of doing the things, or they relying on the data products and the underlying data estate to fetch that information. I think that's where this AI governance became important. Data governance in a traditional way was more on the structured or semi-structured data, more on making sure that, and to be honest, that's fairly, even today, for like 80-85% organizations still is in that terrain of traditional schemas, tables. They want to make sense of it. They want to ensure policies. They want to ensure all of those aspects around governance. That's the struggle that is for real. Yes, there are some organizations now, they have started thinking into, okay, how AI, how can we leverage our unstructured data? How can we deploy these AI models to do things on its own? And those also, I have seen there are two aspects to it. One is internal within their organization, and one is external. External, I would say it's still 5% only, because when your AI goes external, you have 100 list of rules and policies that you need to adhere to before you take your AI externally. And not all organizations data functions are that mature that when a regulator comes up and they say that, yes, see, we have done everything. So yes, it's being done, but it's still in a restrictive zone. But yes, AI internally have started gaining a lot of traction. We are seeing it using our coding assistant to do day-to-day research, do day-to-day work. Everything is kind of gaining traction with AI. And that's where it also becoming a question of, okay, like for example, within ThoughtWorks, if I am researching something to prepare for a client proposal, the information that is coming out of the AI model that the company has deployed, I sometimes have doubt that whether it's the correct. So I need to go back, check it again, and need to ensure that before I put anything in front of a client, it's really making sense and it's really correct. That's where AI governance piece is critical. It's not only about the quality aspect, but it's also about the bias, the hallucination, and those kind of a thing. We have seen examples in the data community how it has created some tensions, biases among different genders, different communities. As an organization, we have to be careful that to avoid all of those things. So that's where I see AI governance playing a lot of big role, ethics and everything.
Yes, so if I summarize that, data governance is important and it helps establish trust. And in an automated world or an increasingly automated world,
Yes,
that trust becomes even more important.
more important.
Let's say that somebody tomorrow, Gaurav, starts, okay, I'm going to start my career. My first project is an AI governance project. What do I do now? From your data governance background and different experiences, what would you recommend to that person?
Yeah, I get this asked quite a few times on LinkedIn as well. My suggestion is always to keep things simple. That is a mantra that I have followed in my real life, and I follow it also today as well. To keep things very simplistic, try to map it out what is basically you're trying to do with any, with data governance or AI governance. What is eventually that you want to achieve for different stakeholders that are in your consideration? What does business really expect out of AI? What does IT really expect out of AI? What does the platform, the engineers, and all of those things they really want to do with AI? Map that out in a very simplistic way, and then figure out for each of them where you can add value or where you can learn. It's not only like, if I learn some Databricks certification or some techniques or tools and I am fluent in AI governance. It's not, that will not happen. It requires an holistic understanding of the purpose behind it, why it is important, why it was launched, what impact it will have if we don't do it correctly. If we understand this, I think those nuances will start coming in, and you people will individual. I, at least in today, uh, even I am learning a lot about AI governance as I work. The more experiences I have, I start learning, okay, oh, this is something which I want to do a little bit more research. This seems interesting. And that's how I approach. So keeping things very simple, do not get bogged down by, what's the noise happening. Yeah.
And keep learning
Keep
from the
learning. Yes.
experience, indeed, because what we saw with AI governance, I mean, it was a topic pre-GPT, obviously, but
Hmm.
almost invisible in the market in terms
Invisible.
of volume. And then post GPT, it became a very important topic, but it's a moving target as the underlying technology moves. So, for example, the first year it was very much about use cases, right? And getting assessments on use cases like risk and privacy assessments. Second year was, oh, we have to deal with agents, right? And we should have a view on what agents live in our system, like an agent registry. And I'm sure that in this year, we will all be dealing with, oh, I have agent swarms, multi-agent systems in my organization. Now what? And how can I ensure trust and quality at that size and scale? Now, one topic before we start closing up, Gaurav, there was one topic that piqued my interest also in what you said, right? So you said structured world and unstructured world, right? And we know the most of the volume of data in organizations lives in unstructured
Unstructured. Yeah.
formats like PDFs and videos and SharePoints and Google Drives and emails and so on and so forth. So do you believe that we'll start to see more of that curation that we learn in the structured world will be applied now to the unstructured world?
Yes, yes. And I think we have already started seeing that trend. Uh, Lot of those things was like, still the approach for many is how do we take unstructured data and convert it into a structured format and then start making sense of it. That was the earlier trend. Now, I'm not that much pro, but I think something with like vector databases and knowledge graphs and all of those things, that step is also becoming more and more automation driven. Like, you don't have to convert everything into a structured content. You take your unstructured data, and through all of these different approaches, you start making, or utilizing it in your AI program. So that's how I see it's evolving, and I'm sure there will be more and more advancements in this field as we go.
Definitely. And maybe if I can combine those two topics, unstructured and data quality. When I first tried to put those two concepts together in my brain, it didn't compute immediately, right? Because
Mm,
you're thinking about structured data quality, which is this completeness and so
mm.
on and so forth. So what does that mean to you, unstructured data quality?
Yeah, I always say that there is two different things: data quality for AI versus AI for data quality. And now we are talking more about data quality for AI. So what does it mean? It exactly is the same thing uh, on the input and output gates. If I try to simplify again through my approach, it's what inputs are you feeding to your AI models versus what outputs it is generating, and between these two, what are those quality criteria that you have implied? And that can be embedded as policy. Nowadays, there are talk about that policy planes and everything. Concepts have started playing, wherein all of your regulatory policies, your own data policies, they are codified in that plane to make sure that AI, whenever those models are trying to generate those outputs, they strictly adhere to those policies. So, in case there is anything that PII comes in, they do not pick it in their reasoning or in their outputs. So, those input and output gates, I think, are the key parts for data quality. And that's how it's not completely formalized yet. It will still keep on evolving as we go. And the other part was more around, AI for data quality. Like Data quality as a stream earlier, it was more of a rule based, give me business rules. I will upload them. I will implement them. Now AI has started kind of automating a lot of these things. It has also started reframing it in a natural language as well. I think that's the biggest achievement. All of these rule suggestions and making the life easy for the data steward is just the tip of the iceberg. But the real benefit it is bringing, I think it's reframing it in a natural language. I think that's the biggest win.
We have more wins in our future then. We're going to close up, Gaurav, but I'm going to ask you one
Yes.
last question. So imagine that you go back in time and you meet your younger self who is just leaving college and about to start a career, but they still have to choose. What is the advice, like in one or two sentences, what advice would you try to give to your younger self?
Yes. Yes, that one advice which I have learned the hard way is also, try to tell and go back that do not get overwhelmed by the noise around you. Believe in your approach. Keep things very simple and always raise your hands to solve problems. It's not important to it's yes, it's less important to raise or kind of find the faults, but it's more important to give solution to these faults. So if you are that person who are trying to solve problems, I think rather than finding the problems, I think you will find a lot of success in your career. That would be the thing.
That's great advice. And of course, the additional advice is to go buy and read the book Data Quality ROI.
Yes.
Gaurav, thank
Thank
you
you for
very
that.
much for
Thank you.
unpacking the space with us and looking forward to the next time. Have a nice
Yes, thank
day.
you, Sven. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Want even more insight into managing your data? Visit calibra.com/podcasts for additional resources on the topics covered in our show. And be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Data Citizens Dialogues is a Calibra production.